being a law student, I think what really gets you the feel for law is constitutional law. The other day I read a quote: power tends to corrupt, but absolute power causes absolute corruption. And when you take a look at the checkered history of judiciary and constitution in Pakistan, it makes it all clear that it is all just a power game, a political ploy. One individual, one institution usurps power and consolidates it within itself. That is what happens not just in Pakistan, but in around the world. See, this nature of politics and human's nature. Power grabbing is an inherent quality. Now, this quality is something that the 13 colonies during the American Revolution recognized when they told no to King George's tyranny, when they told no to a one person rule. They devised a new system of governance, a system with mechanisms that is not consolidated in one monarch, a king, or an individual. The powers of the state is shared in a system in what we now know as the system of checks and balances and the separation of powers. Judiciary, executive, and the parliament. These make up the three branches of the government. The system of checks and balances tells us that these three branches of government compete against one another. And in doing so, they make sure that the other branch doesn't grab power that is not delegated to it. Now, this system, this principle of checks and balances, and this principle of the separation of powers is not alone in America. It has other principles like equality before law, equal protection of law, independence of judiciary, etc., that all make a bigger, that make paint a bigger picture of the rule of law. The rule of law, in its modern sense, is all of these qualities, these principles that America has actualized. So successful was this American experiment that later constitutions would follow it. Even your own Pakistan's constitution, the 1973 constitution, the rule of law is an inherent part of it. When you go back to 1947 to 1949 and you see the objectives resolution, you see that there are four standing qualities that make the objective resolution stand out. The first, of course, Pakistan being an Islamic republic. The second, Pakistan a republican democracy. Third, Pakistan to not have any violations of minority rights. And fourth, the independence of judiciary is to be guaranteed. Now, these principles of constitution making was repeated and was seen reverberated in all of constitutions that were attempted, especially, of course, for the 1973 constitution. But despite that the rule of law forms the centerpiece of Pakistan's constitution, we have had several constitutional crises, which then necessitated another constitution. But right before these constitutional crises, we see that the rule of law, the shape and the form that it took, was best to be called rule by law. Rule by law, as is suggestive of the name, is rule using law as a tool. Now, there are certain examples, certain countries that are great for telling you why rule of law is not to be undermined. Two recent examples that I will give from our own history is the recent erosion of judicial independence, which now the top judges are selected by the parliament, which was previously an automatic process where the most senior judge would be the top judge. This goes against the very principles of separation of powers and, in fact, the rule of law. But it's not just judiciary that is being affected through legislature. It is also the other way around. When regimes are imposed on the populace of Pakistan, it is often the judiciary that provide the legal cover. So rule by law can go both ways. It can go either through legislation and it will be legally okay, or it could be in the form of judgment. But in the eyes of rule of law, both of these measures wouldn't be anything related to the rule of law. It would be the opposite, rule by law. And when we see in the age of information technology that states that do not respect the rule of law, they have a bleak future. Just recent examples of Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. Gen Z inherited a system which was inherently flawed, a system that was not based on the rule of law, it was based on the rule by law, using law as a weapon. Pakistan's condition is different. Pakistan has endured many such rules and has come on top. But seeing that most of Pakistan's population is a young population and is increasingly being informed through social media, which is now the mainstream media, it becomes expedient that young people know not only what their rights are, which they don't know by the way, but also what their duties are to the country. If the system of checks and balances does not work, it becomes on we the people to check the branches of the government. In doing so, there are 3 steps to make sure that this happens and an upending of a regime is averted. The first, that awareness be spreaded about what the constitution is, what people's rights are. Most of people don't know what their rights are, even law students. And they learn that the hard way when they get into trouble, when they see that asking your own rights is a very hard thing. The second is that the youth of Pakistan is informing its knowledge through mainstream media, which is now the social media. And through that, they can carry on the message of those framers that gave us the objectives resolution and gave us a rule of law and made it a part of the constitutional and the principles through which it will live on beyond the constitution. Some of these principles might be disagreeable, but the rule of law is our only safest bet for a prosperous country, for its institutions to grow tall, strong, but also separated. And that is why the rule of law can indeed avert a major problem that we now see in most of South Asian countries that are happening and upending many regimes. Thank you.